Thanks for joining us today, Arturo. To kick things off, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself and your background?
Yes, thank you for having me. Arturo Loaiza-Bonilla, a medical oncologist by background and the co-founder and chief medical officer of MassiveBio. Active researcher. I still want to be in practice so I can, feel the pain points that we have on a daily basis to help our patients and everyone else in the ecosystem. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the time.
What inspired you to do a career in medicine, Arturo?
There was no physician in my family. Now I was the first out of several more that came after, out of the inspiration that we had, because my grandfather from my mom's side, we were like a big family. He had like 9 kids and a bunch of grandchildren, and I was the eldest of the grandchildren. And my grandfather was always very strong, very sturdy. He just was never willing to go to a doctor because he said, I don't need to. I'm just going to manage. And he was in the military for a while, and then he started working then as an accountant. He decided to study himself more and settle down in Bogota, which is the main capital. And while he was dealing with that, he suffered from gout, which is a very benign condition. People just take colchicine or allopurinol, and they get rid of their uric acid and they change their diet. But he never wanted to see a doctor, and because of that he just kept taking NSAIDs, which is basically ibuprofen or medications as such, and he ended up damaging his kidneys. So he was in dialysis. So to me that was so dramatic when I saw him when I was a teenager going through that. And I said, after I learned further, is like, this could have been so preventable if we had at least one family member that actually was in the medical field. Everyone else, my grandfather just got them all through college, but they were all in, administration stuff and MBAs and things, nothing to do with medicine. So they kind of like, no one was really invested on it. And I said, even though I was pretty young, I said, I want to be a doctor just to prevent this from happening ever again to any member of my family. Kind of like being the family doctor, literally. So, so that's how I got into medicine. I started pretty young. So I was 16 when I first got into medical school and started, learning the whole thing. And it's been several decades since then, and further now, oncology and beyond.
And why oncology? What led you from medicine to specialize in oncology?
Well, it's one of those things that also happen sometimes by serendipity, and also there's something that pushes you to go further into a field. So I always wanted to be a physician for adults. So after I finished my medical school in Colombia, I saved all the money that I got, like a little scholarship that I had at the end, to pay for my first test. So I came to the US with that. And as I was training in Baltimore, I was doing epigenetics in leukemia at Hopkins, and at that time my brother had diagnosis of leukemia. So I was already kind of in the field, but now I have even further interest on working on the specific, understanding of leukemia and how it came about and all that. So I said, this is what I wanted to do. I was between, GI and oncology, and now I do a lot of GI oncology, so kind of combine them two, kind of went back a bit with, but it was one of those things that I said, I need to know how to help my family further now on this too. And it was really helpful to me. So that I got into oncology and biomarkers and understanding clinical trials and how to navigate, a lot of things that happen when you are not only, someone who has the knowledge clinically, but also understanding what happens with a loved one or being a caregiver of someone. So so that was part of it, and one of the reasons why I ended up moving to Miami from Baltimore. I was meant to stay there, but I decided to go to the University of Miami for training. It was much easier to go back and forth to Colombia, and I love that program too. So it was kind of like a perfect combo for me to further my knowledge in HEMONC.
Fantastic. And what you find most rewarding about your work?
Helping someone, even if you cannot cure them or be the best solution that we can provide, just having that, human interaction with them. And then, I'm all into AI and all that stuff, but I still know for a fact that the human component is so important in how we're helping, patients and families just to even understanding, their disease, or finding that biomarker that the patient actually matches to and put the patient on the treatment, and then they have a good response. To me, those are like rewarding things. And one of the reasons why I stay in practice, I just saw yesterday a patient of mine, she's always allows me to talk about her, for HIPAA, I won't say her name or anything, but she's a patient that I had been following for about 5 years now with colorectal cancer metastatic. And she's followed me in 3 institutions just because we had this relationship, and it's all about biomarker-based treatment. So she was meant to go on hospice, and I decided to do a liquid biopsy on her, and she had a biomarker that was, MSI high and BRAF mutated, and she's been responding to immunotherapy and more recently to targeted combination as well. And that thing, knowing that she's now still over 85 and being able to still do her things. She still cooks by herself. She goes and sees her friends, and she sees me always this big smile in the office. That is one of the things I look back and say, okay, this is what I wanted to be in this field. Even though we cannot help 100% everyone with all their needs, we can do a little bit of glimmer of hope to accomplish something for them.
Very good.
Excellent. And then what led you to found MassiveBio?
So yeah, MassiveBio came about. I after University of Miami, I moved to. I was recruited as faculty at UPenn and joined the Revolutionizing Cancer Center as a GI oncologist. And I did a master's in medical education as well at the graduate school. And while I was there, I started to go deeper into education about clinical trials as I was doing research as well. And that was the age where biomarkers were coming, like NGS was becoming more relevant. At the time, no one had even put in the curriculum for fellows to learn about NGS and how to interpret those results. And all these new trials with biomarker-based treatment options were coming about. And I saw a big opportunity because many of my patients who were coming to see me in very good cancer center, unfortunately, were already heavily pretreated. They had seen me as the last resort, right? So it's like after they had been treated in the community, which is, right now I'm community practice oncologist, we tend to keep our patients closer to home, right? And patients prefer to be closer to homes because they're dealing with cancer. So clinical trials don't really come easy to those patients because they're not close to the facility that offers them. And physicians in the community, as they don't subspecialize because there's no way to do that, right? Then clinical trials becomes almost like an afterthought. It's like, oh, this gives standard of care. And then when they see center that actually are looking for trials, is only like, Hail Mary, this is the last thing I want to do. And that, creates, it's almost like a self-fulfilled prophecy that, a trial is not going to work out because you're already too late. If we did the flip of seeing clinical trials as a standard of care option from the very beginning across the cancer journey, we have a much better chances of getting that patient in the clinical trial, benefiting the patient itself, himself, herself, and also improving the R&D industry. So as I went deeper into this, I realized that this crazy statistic, which to me is a paradox, right? So 0.1% of patients enrolled in clinical trials out of 12 million patients that were diagnosed in the last decade, but that 0.1% lived longer, better lives, probably less expensive, treatments as well, and still got the best out of it. While the 99.9% just went along with whatever they needed to do. But the studies are closing about 50 to 60% of them because of lack of accrual. And they say that there is like too many studies. I'm like, I don't believe so, because there's so many patients. So of course, there could be an abundance of study at a given time for a specific disease. because that's the one or the mechanism of action of that is really R&D is like focus on it. There's a checkpoint inhibitors or something like that at some point that everyone was doing the same. Yeah, of course, there could be a lot of trials for that only, and that became the thing. But if you look at cancer as a whole, there is so much opportunity and gaps that patients don't know about treatments. So that is one of the things that inspired me, and I met Celine, which is my other co-founder, and Chata, who is the technical side, and came together and say, this is a solvable problem. This is not a new problem. And it's not like, oh my God, so brilliant, you have this new idea. No, this idea has been forever, but the time was ripe to actually use technology at scale and along with concert services to get those patients from point A to point B. And instead of using all those random funds on pamphlets and brochures that no one reads and the industry spends millions of dollars for no reason, let's use those funds to help that patient to use technology to find treatment options in real time. So that's how MassiveBio came about. We started with virtual tumor boards, giving more treatment options beyond clinical trials, but then we super specialize in clinical trials because it's the only way we can really get the AI component up to speed and at scale. So I know it was a super long story, but that's how it came.
Yeah, very good. And what are what are the services that address these challenges within MassiveBio?
So the first thing is clinical trials and patient journeys are in constant flux. So one day a patient of mine could be eligible for a clinical trial, but tomorrow will not be because the study closes or the site close to them is no longer available or open, or the FDA or the EMA or whatever regulatory agency puts a hold on the study. And also even insurance may change, right? And that can change the whole thing because now you're out of network and the budget has not been discussed, etc. At the same time, the patient, one day you have a good performance status, and then maybe a week from now you end up in the hospital with an infection, and now your performance status lowers, or your hemoglobin changes by 1 gram, or your cancer progresses, and unfortunately you move from like first line to second line. And all that changes in real time. All this options is like you have a future with all this potential realities of multiverses right now, which is one of them is a clinical trial journey. And one thing changes and immediately creates a paradox that changes you to a completely different direction, right? So the only way to control that is having a real-time assessment of the criteria that is available in clinicaltrials.gov or any other data sources. We are working with pharmaceutical companies to actually get the protocols so we can digitize them and use the data in a much more higher fidelity than clinicaltrials.gov because, as you may imagine, that can lack a lot of nuance. So you may say, oh, you're matching for a trial, and then you go there and the study is not even available because that never opened, or the study closed many months ago on that side, or the arm that you were eligible for out of the multiple arms of that study is no longer available because it completed this lot allocation. So all these different things can change. So what we're trying to do is overcome all that and become a solution that is automated for that purpose, at least for that data component that we can control. At the same time, we are able to collect data from electronic health systems, electronic health records. Right now, we have the exchanges. We can access some of those records in real time as long as the patient signs the consent. So we're doing it patient-centric for that purpose. So the patient is at the center of the equation. They say, I want to know about my clinical trial options. And then with that authorization, we can request records in real time to give them real-time updates. And they don't have to be reliant on self-reported information because my patients, as much as they want to know about their cancers, they don't know, all the nuances of clinical trials. Even, some folks, when I onboarded on MassiveBio to work with us, they need to learn a little bit further because you need to be a fully trained oncologist and researcher to know sometimes the minutia that comes along with those clinical trial and protocols. So it's making it basically, you don't have to think about it. You just come in
Yeah.
here, sign up, and then you have your options ahead of you, and this is the reason why you are eligible. And at the same time, the physicians like myself who are very busy in clinic, instead of saying 30 patients a day, and there's one patient who needs clinical trials, well, if you want to help that patient, that's okay, but that will take at least an hour of your day just to look for the trial available for the patient, giving them a list of those options, and then that's it. No one helps the patient to use that information to move from the next step in terms of health, right? So, and we are so busy that we want to help the patient, but we don't have the ability to do this concierge for them. I mean, because that's not even, the incentives are not aligned. So that's one less patient coming to our clinic that we had to spend doing these, almost, secretarial tasks that someone or a system can do much more efficiently. So that's, the multi-stakeholder approach to make it much easier for them to really get into trials and solve all those barriers that we're learning are emerging as topics to solve this paradigm.
So do you mean it like when you say digitize the protocol, is it like integrated with the EHR and auto selects patients based on their parameters, or how is it? How does that work, and how does it kind of help?
Yeah, so that's one of the potential use cases. So the first thing we realize is that we can do that. For example, there's a cancer center that it has a lot of different trials, or it belongs to a network that has a lot of trials, like the U.S. Oncology Network or HCA or etc. And I used to work at Cancer Treatment Centers of America in the past, so we had a lot of trials, but not open in every single place because it's almost impossible. But they were committed to research. So when we started, basically was exactly what you said. So we applied for an NCI SBIR grant, and that was our first jumping into the grant acquisition and working with NIH and the NCI. We implemented that at Columbia University at the beginning, basically just doing what you said, which is we embed ourselves within their EHR instance, and then we, upon request, we can check if the patient is eligible for the trials internally as a priority, of course, because we want to keep retention and patients coming into there and making sure that we don't miss any patients, because it's my own experience that my colleague didn't know that I had the trial open, right? So even though they work with me and we're across the hallway, they are doing their own thing, so they don't know what studies do I have or not, and sometimes there are too many. So first thing is retention. And second, let's say the patient doesn't have any more options or there's more trials, they want to know if there's anything else across the street. And we want to give them that nuance as well of additional information. So we that's one of the things we have done in the past, and we have availability to do that as well. We do that in the OUS as well in certain countries. So we do that in Spain, in Poland, where we go to the centers and embed ourselves for that purpose. If we go, in the US, things are more, decentralized, so get a little bit more siloed, and they don't want to pay because they see, this as a software we're selling them. And I never want to be like that. I never want to say, I'm selling you something. I want to be always like, I'm helping you solve a fundamental problem in research, and this is a societal improvement by doing this. So we said, you don't have to pay anything. We are going to do it cloud-based, but we need to use the right APIs with the electronic health records. So instead of us installing ourselves into a health system, we are connected through some form of API, so we can get a request for our clinical trial matching, and we can operate almost in near real time. Relying on faxes and back and forth information and all the stuff is great, but it's something that I want to overcome as much as I can. So, so we've been working basically on a cloud-based basis, where either the physician can send a request for clinical trial matching with the patient's permission. So there's one way. Or we sign BAAs with the institutions as well. So we did that with the Oncology Institute. So basically, they have 60 practices across, several, like in 5 states in the US. And they have tons of trials, but all of them kind of in different places. So for their own purpose, they realize that clinical trial is a way for them to do value-based care and to also optimize their portfolio. So they basically send requests directly to us, and then we give them reports in real time as well for the physicians to look into and help the patients, and sometimes even to move one place to the other for the patient itself. It's a way to do this approach.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah, could you tell us a bit about your work in AI in oncology?
Yeah, so it seems like now is the topic of the day. So at least I'm proud to say that we were working with AI before all the hype, because now it seems like I'm looking at my LinkedIn and everyone seems to be an AI expert. Right? So,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, great if that's the reality. But something that I was very passionate was in using technology, and I wanted to be an engineer before, before all this journey I was talking about with my family.
Yeah.
I always thought that I wanted to be a computer scientist. And I'm not a computer scientist myself. I mean, don't think I'm like coding. I mean, I can code, but I had to learn Python as a way older than I should have learned it. But I always wanted to get there. But in Colombia, when I said, "Oh, I want to be a computer scientist," "Oh, you're going to fix computers," like kind of putting them together. That's what they thought I was going to do. So I was like pretty bummed about it. But when I moved to the US, I saw, okay, there's real potential in doing this. So as soon as we got into doing our virtual tumor boards, we said we need to use different tools that come around to optimize our workflows, and that's when we started using ontology-based and corpus, and also looking at clinical trial matching using parameterization, and we had to start using OCR and NLP, and with that came on the AI component of what we started doing. You started with very basic tasks, and then now with the emergence of large language models, such as ChatGPT and now Gemini and Llama and all the stuff, that really kind of made an explosion to it. So I was an enthusiast of it. I decided to study a little bit of that at MIT, one of those extension courses. But I really started to talk to people. And one of the things I realized is how much potential it has in oncology. So over the last probably 4 years, I've been dedicating myself to understand the different use cases of AI for oncology and for oncology research to optimize operations, and also to start looking into drug discovery and beyond. So now the time is right, because now I feel perfect. It is that, okay, now everyone is talking about the things that I love to do in the field, and some folks are like, knowledgeable that we can have pretty interesting conversations, and I welcome that movement. So right now, one of my main interests is to use multi-modal approaches to do prognostication in terms of clinical trials, but also when can we use this specific information to do modification on their cancer outcome. So can we use this for assessment of microbiome, for example? That's a main interest of mine, because there's very interesting data coming up that we can use that in real time, and it doesn't really develop. You don't need to develop a new drug for this. We just need to start looking at deeper into the patient's information, in collaboration for example, making all these tasks that come with research much more efficient. There is so much work and so many different touch points that need to happen just for recruitment, which is before the signature of the consent, but even after, 67 steps prior, and almost the same number of channels that need to be leveraged so we can get one patient enrolled. Plus, then when the patient enrolls in the study, how we can keep the patient engaged and improve retention, satisfaction, and getting the right patient to the right trial. So all that, command center kind of Uber style of assessment of what with the cancer journeys and trials and physicians is what I'm super interested in using AI for that purpose right now.
Very good. And just a question on that, I suppose with the tech industry, like I suppose from a general sense, AI, like it's within a year, it's taken over in terms of every facet. It's coming in quite quickly. But the challenge in medicine, do you think, like, would the adoption, will it be similar to past kind of, will it be as slow in healthcare, or do you think will it be adopted quite quickly?
So yeah, it's an interesting question because it depends on who you talk to, right? There's some folks who are really interested to adopt the technologies,
Yeah,
but I think that this is something that at least the healthcare industry is not 100% ready to adopt because they first of all, there's the regulatory environment is still pretty nebulous,
yeah,
particularly for AI in healthcare. And once that happens, then you start coming around like, are we, particularly around clinical decision support, do we need to get that vetted by the FDA? And is
yeah,
the FDA already into it in terms of use case, understands the nuances to the point that it doesn't become a hurdle for adoption, right? Because when things become too complicated, people are immediately shut off, right? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well, you guys are expert on that because you know exact engagement on using technology, right? So
yeah,
when they engage an app or something, imagine just even more meta than that, which is, do I need to do these requirements just to get, access to that tool? People are going to immediately start recoiling. So I think that at the end of the day, it's all about the power of the incentives. So is like the insurance industry, CMS, and payers ready to implement some of these solutions to optimize outcomes and be able to reimburse for some of those things, so people feel more compelled to do so always. The other one is, are we making sure that the physicians don't feel that they're being replaced by these tools, because that's something that is always top of the mind of people. And even in use cases such as radiology, I think there's still a lot of component of human that needs to happen. It may make it faster for radiologists to review images, but they still have to have the clinical judgment that the machine doesn't have. And as far as we know, even with Gemini and GPT-4, I don't think we have reached the level of AGI to be comfortable that they're going to be able to answer all the questions. And they may say, oh yeah, we got near human capabilities of understanding of data. I think that is great for like big picture. Like, I want to know about, give me the common features of pancreatic cancer. Okay, yeah, it's probably going to tell you the bulk of the information you need. And I think this is great for education and for us to make our lives easier to explain things and beyond. But if you want to go more in the clinical decision support, there's a lot of nuances that go beyond that. And like, just for my patient, transportation, my patient wasn't going to engage into a therapy because she needed transport for that specific drug. And hadn't been a human there to understand that and try to solve it in real time, that wouldn't have happened. So I don't think an AI right now, unless it's a full, this, I don't know, like a data of, Star Trek, right? Kind of a person that has all that, multi-modal, very in-depth, super specialized module that able to work for that patient and able to switch from one module to the other one that is appropriate for that use case. I don't think that there's ever going to be a replacement for humans and physicians as a whole. So I think that all that long response was aimed to say that I think that we need to overcome that fear. Because we hear like, Vinod Khosla, I respect him a lot, but he's like, oh, we're going to replace oncologists in like 10 years. I'm like, no, it's going to be a co-pilot of mine. I can tell you, I mean, even myself being an AI enthusiast, I don't see anything replacing the human interaction at any point. So we'll see what happens. But I think what's going to become is more about the initial adoption for like things like medical records and maybe recording of experiences in clinics. So you have that with Nuance and Microsoft and others kind of like putting that information in the EHR and making some orders maybe like verbally, but that's going to come with a cost. So we're already paying a ton of money for, Epic and Cerner and, Allscripts and all the other EHR vendors. Are we going to pay also for the extra AI module? It has to come lower cost.
Yeah. It's true.
Makes a lot of sense. And what do you see as the biggest challenges in oncology today beyond AI and, like what, going back to the basics?
Yeah. So, well, the biggest challenges, I believe, are sometimes simple. So one of the things that I see and I feel we can make a difference is in improving biomarker testing for our patients. And that's such an easy, straightforward thing to do. I mean, of course, I can go super high, like 4th degree of assessment and talk about, the use of bispecifics or the combinations of immunotherapy with self-adaptive therapy and AI and the use of CRISPR. I mean, yeah, those are very cool problems to solve and look into to improve, cures. But we haven't even gone back to the basics, right? So I cannot automate something that it hasn't really been fully done by humans. So because the models will emulate basically that. One of the challenges I see is, for example, in non-small cell lung cancer. How is it possible that only half of the patients get ever tested for the biomarkers that already have a drug approved by the FDA? And it's not because we don't have the resources. The insurance pays for it. We even as physicians don't even have to pay for those NGS tests. We don't get paid for them. So I think that's also part of the reason. I mean, we're like, I don't have to deal with the billing, so I don't even remember if I ordered the NGS on my patient. How come we haven't even fully adopted liquid biopsies as a tool? I talk to folks that, no, I prefer tissue. Why? I mean, maybe for, you're looking for RNA and specific fusions. Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, you're doing a glioblastoma. You don't want to do a liquid biopsy on that. But if you're looking for non-small cell lung cancer, you can actually do tissue-based assays and liquid-based ctDNA and probably complete the equation because you're getting, the 10% that each other misses and help the patient in front of you. But we're not even there yet. We're not even testing the patients. And when we test the patients, even worse is that the biomarker is there, but we don't treat the patient for that with that biomarker specific drug. And that is because of this information craziness that we had to deal with, that we had so many patients, we forgot, and then the biomarker remains there, and then the patient unfortunately passes away or goes to a health system that is different and no one is checking on that. So making it patient-centric to me is so important. So that's why for me is making data much more accessible, but not in the way that other folks say, oh yeah, I'm democratizing data. I mean, that's all, great, but like actionable data. Are we going to be able to help the patient and say, you need to have this biomarker testing at least once and have it on top of your head and have it an automated system to let you know when a new drug is available, and we physicians not being the roadblock, not because we want to be, but because we're so busy that we need help, and we're terrible at asking for help. So we're like my grandfather, right? So it's like, oh no, I can do it. Okay, there you go, right? So we need to try to be as helpful as possible. First, ordering the right test for our right patients, but also letting ourselves being helped by some of this technology. So my main challenge is let's solve the house first with things that we can really make a difference, and then start looking for the more advanced questions. The good news is that we have the pharma focusing on those other questions of innovation in terms of new drugs and mechanism of action, and we have big meetings such as ASCO and ASH and AACR that are always posing those challenges. But I think we need to go back to basic principles, right? So fixing the the spaceship before we go to Mars. People are already in Mars, like trying to go there without oxygen, right? So let's try to focus on here. We're just with Celine, she always says, well, we're just a bicycle level of this. And I think we can really make it a rocket ship, but it needs to come from collaboration. It cannot be just one person or one company. Everyone needs to want to work together and see the big picture in the long run.
And do you actually think it's a hurdle? Like what kind of what do you think it'll take for it to shift that way, to improve? Like, will it take a lot of upfront, or is there small shifts or small changes that are needed overall?
Yeah, so I think that there is this sense of ownership of the patient, because we care about the patient so much, because we dedicate our lives, we studied many years to become good at taking care of patients, that we almost have this paternalistic, maternalistic way of seeing patients. So, and the patients also on the other side is, I don't want to even ask questions because my doctor knows. I mean, some patients are super advocates for themselves, but most of them are not. They're like, whatever you say, doc, I'll take care of it. Well, the change that we can do is first, setting a tool or something that is going to help that patient all the time and giving us updates so we are aware of this, but also removing the challenges that we have to deal with, which is clicking and sending requests and prior authorization. So it needs, for example, for this biomarker thing, we need a couple of solutions. First, we need to have, basically automated processes where it's almost a reflex. As the patient, is the patient going to start treatment with this, whatever chemoimmunotherapy in first line for non-small cell lung cancer? Okay, let's run biomarker, assessment. Has the patient been tested with NGS? Yes or no? I don't see it. Okay, we need to authorize this right away, but the patient needs to get a testing before we authorize this. So once the power of the purse is there, people are, oh, I'm going to test right away, right? So let me just sign this form, because you cannot, you cannot even believe this. I have had patients who really need biomarker testing, and we helped the patient to fill the forms of 5 different NGS vendors that we had checked they used. It said, sign any of this. And the physician goes there and say, yeah, I'll sign it. And then the form stays at the office by the fax machine, and it doesn't get signed for sometimes never. And it's fully pre-filled. They just need to sign it. Whichever vendor they use. It doesn't, we don't even say, oh, use, XYZ. No, it's just get it tested. And it becomes so out of mind that they don't even get it done. So I think the insurances have to say, wait a minute, we need to know if this patient has a biomarker testing or not, because that opens the door for clinical trials and opens the door for optimized options instead of therapies that are not available. So that's the first part. The second is making automatable. So a physician basically has a way to go. So okay, you have one token to get this testing done. In that you have one life in Mario, right? This is just play this one, and now you had your testing that you needed to get done. The same way as they do it for PET scans in pancreas cancer. You're only allowed to have one time, I believe, but you actually get it done. So can insurances do that? Of course, they can say that. It's like, okay, I will authorize this, but let's get genomic testing on this patient. If it's negative or nothing, that's okay. You will still have the decision based between your patient and your doctor, but at least that testing got done, right? So that's the first thing I feel needs to change. And second, having us physicians not even to think about it. Just the results are coming in, and we have the options in front of us to know what to do for the patient. And if the patient wants to go for a clinical trial, also payers need to realize that a clinical trial is a very good option for the patients. And sometimes they say, oh, we have to pay for all these extra things. It's like, well, we're in the US in the right to try era, which basically I can always advocate for any treatment, and technically the payer has to pay for it. Why, instead of spending all that money and those resources in maybe drugs that are not helpful, help the patient and the whole industry and ecosystem by putting the patients on trials that are appropriate for them? So those small changes, which are 1 or 2 decision points at the most, can really completely change the paradigm of how we're treating our cancer patients. So that's why I joined CancerX, and we are working on that very judiciously. But we need this power of cross collaboration because until everyone realizes this is a real problem, and it takes a couple of steps to solve, it will not happen.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
Very good. And can you discuss any recent advances in cancer treatment that you find particularly exciting or promising?
Oh yeah, so there is in the hem-onc side, there's always something coming up. That we pass now from the era of the checkpoint inhibitors, where we just basically awakening the immune system to attack the cancer, to now becoming super specific, by using things like bispecific antibodies. So having basically the chance of, you have the biomarker here, and then you have the effector cell, and then you combine them together. So basically bringing them to almost like a cage fight. So you're bringing the two players in front. You don't have to have one player look for the contender. They're all coming in the same stage, right? So I think bispecifics are one of the new things that is happening in the space that is going to revolutionize the treatment options for our patients. We are also seeing some light at the end of the tunnel with gene editing and CRISPR. So now we have these approved therapies for sickle cell, even though it's not cancer. It's it opens the door to things that are that we can modify potentially to optimize outcomes for our patients. So if certain mutations are happening that are driving this whole thing, maybe we can adjust and bring those cells back to normality and make those patterns much more manageable for patients. In sickle cell, we just make a mutation that single change that is making those cells having less sickle cell crisis. Can we do the same to maybe prevent an oncogenic event that happens as part of a step approach? That will be an interesting way to do this. Or can we modify certain cells to now recognize cancers that have certain mutations? Cell adoptive therapy is also now coming into the solid tumor side, which I'm super interested to learn more, with more biomarker coming up. So for example, they have like Claudin 18.2. Now we are leveraging HER2 overexpression by using it also in a more cancer agnostic approach and more biomarker driven approach, using now ADCs, so antibody drug conjugates, which are actually even better than the prior generations of them because they have a different payload of the chemotherapy component of them, or cytotoxic drug that you attach to it. So I think we are into a new era of combinations, of dual targeting, and now cell adoptive therapy becoming a new thing, which I think we're going to be seeing a bunch of news coming up soon on this. And I think another component that is key is this AI part. Because now with AI, we can start making faster assessments of the efficacy or potential benefit of drugs or molecules that we didn't have before. And the investment into those efforts, I think they're going to be very fruitful. I will not be surprised if we're going to start seeing companies that like Recursion and others that are really developing in silico trials and doing N of 1 for patients and getting patients to remission in real time, and hopefully at scale and much cheaper than going through the whole development process. But we also require the FDA and other agencies to have a different mindset, right? That the paradigm has shifted and changed, and we had to take a little bit of a different mindset in terms of risk, because in the past, yes, it makes sense because we're doing things that we had no idea how to interpret them because they were brand new. But now with this development of different models that are multi-modal, we can really predict how potentially patients are going to do with very high fidelity. So I think now we can make probably studies cheaper and know how the patient's journeys will be. So more to follow on that, but those are very interesting things that I'm going to follow very closely.
Very good.
And very final question. So for any patients or caregivers listening to this, any advice that you would give them?
Always the same advice that I want to give my patients is, be your own advocate. You own your journey. This is your life. So I'm never afraid to let my patients go elsewhere to get treatment, to get better options, because I don't have them all. I have a lot of them, and I think we're gifted with, brains and ability to collaborate. So I have colleagues across the country that I send patients to, and we're never offended by sending a patient to a clinical trial or to get different options. So I always want to tell patients and caregivers, like, this is your life. Think of this as, there's nothing that is going to keep you from, being successful as much as possible by, not asking questions. So use all the tools to your disposal. There's things that you can do, like, for example, with MassiveBio, empower you with clinical trials, but always ask the question, is there any biomarker, any test that I have not got done that maybe can help me? Is there any other option, or can we start planning ahead for point, at one point A? Is there anything from plan B, C, D? And that's all the things that I always want for myself. So if I was in that position, what would I want my doctor, my physician, to tell me? So always be your own advocate. I know it sounds, oh, you're just reading the same thing, and that logo can be everywhere, like the slogan can be everywhere. But you cannot realize how many people don't even think about it. They just simply go through treatments without realizing anything, and they just react to things when there's nothing else. And remember that we physicians we're so busy that we want to help you, but we can only help you when we meet your needs and meet you where you are. So that's something that I always tell them. And if you want for clinical trials, that's what we do for a living. So happy to be part of the conversation always and helping them whatever they need. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Arturo. Thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Best of luck with MassiveBio, and it's great to see it grow all the time.
Thank you. Yes. So now this is all coming together. So yeah, we're big in the rocket ship, but once again, we need the fuel, the folks, the staff, and we need the the NASA budget. So that's what we all working together to make it happen.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Perfect.